First thing I want to say about contracting, because here we're talking about contracting, the contractor's license, right? Often that is a place where people really get hung up, and it's more of a psychological hang up than it is a reality hang up. And I spent at least 2 or 3 years just stressing about, am I going to get my contractor's license? Should I? Yes, legally in California, you really should if you're going to do more than $600 worth of work in a year. But gosh, the application process is intimidating. It costs a lot of money. Am I going to pass? What's going to happen? As I legitimize my business by being an actual contractor, now I've got to pay taxes. I have to have insurance. I need to be bonded. So there's a whole a cascade of different legitimacy actions and investments that you have to make when you become a contractor. So I built this up for years. I just want to dispel this myth. I built this up for years. I did work not as a contractor, which is risky, but usually the place to start. And a friend of mine, one day, a colleague said, why are you stressing so much about getting your license? It's just a test. You go to a class and you take a test, and then you're done. And you don't ever have to take the test again. That's it. It's just a rite of passage. You do it, you're done, you move on with life. So that really helped break down the psychological fear that I had. And so I did it. I went to Sacramento, California. I paid to take a 2-day class. So day 1, 8 hours of learning about contracting law. Day 2, 8 hours learning how to pass the landscaper C27 contractor's test. Morning of day 3, I went in and took the test and passed it. Done. Moving on. Okay? Just want to dispel the myth that often people get hung up in that. And like I said, it's very likely that you will need to start without a contractor's license. You do have to prove 4 years of journeyman or journeywoman experience. But often you can get people to vouch for you, colleagues, friends, past employers. They're really not enforcing and checking all your references and all of that. And so I guess what I'm saying is to get your contractor's license is much less of a big deal than it seems like when you call and talk to Department of Consumer Affairs or you look at the application process. It's really intimidating. It's really not that big of a deal. I was worried because at that point, I was so not in the system. I didn't have a credit card. I didn't own a house. I didn't have a loan out. I never paid taxes that I knew of. I didn't even know if I paid taxes or not. That's how just out of it I was, and I thought, oh my gosh, I'm like, am I a rebel? Like, are they even going to let me take the test and all this stuff? You have to get fingerprinted. I did a lot of activist work for a lot of years, got arrested a bunch of times, and I thought, oh no, like they're going to find out about it. Never convicted of anything. And so, but all that is just BS, It's just a rite of passage, and it's really not that big of a deal to go get your license. But then you are in the system at that point. So one thing that's important to ask yourself is, do you want to play the game and be in the system, pay taxes, pay for insurance, be bonded, and be legitimate? And in doing so, you will get the big projects. Or are you such a rebel and an anarchist that you say, F the system, absolutely no way am I getting involved in that, in which case you're working under the table for cash, you're not going to get the big projects unless they're cannabis growers, but maybe you're skipping out on paying taxes, maybe you're doing all this. I'm not suggesting tax fraud, take that out of the video. But these are questions that you have to ask yourself, and you need to come to terms with it, because you do have a ton of liability when you become a contractor, and it is risky and it can be scary. Not taking the test, but when you're actually a contractor, and now you're responsible for the things that you do. You're responsible for the huge excavator that's coming up, and hopefully you have a good operator that doesn't accidentally nudge the column on the house when they go by, right? Hopefully you have liability insurance if they do. So I want to break it down for you like this. There's another route to go where you don't have to become a licensed contractor. And that is the route of a consultant, and the route of a designer. I have a lot of colleagues who are very successful. They make good money. They're very professional. They don't have a contractor's license, but they are just designers. You can be a designer without having to be a licensed architect, without having to be a licensed contractor. And then what you can do, and this is a really interesting little way to thread your way through the system, is you can support from a project management point of view, helping your clients find contractors to build to build out the design that you've come up with. So you don't take on the liability of being a contractor. Other people are doing that work for you, but you do that because you've built a network of contractors that you trust and are proven. But you can still kind of stay at the top of the information stream and be the one who's interfacing with the client, managing the workflow, managing subcontractors. And you can make pretty good money that way. And the beautiful thing about that pattern is very low overhead. And overhead is something that we probably want to talk a little bit about during this talk, and because I think people don't have a clear understanding of what overhead is. How many people, when I say overhead, know what I'm talking about? Cool. And probably there's a percentage of you that you think you know what overhead is, and maybe you don't. Because there's overhead, and then there's the costs of goods sold, which are different, and then there's profit. So you actually have three different tracks on top of, three different tracks that you need to keep track of when you're running a business. And we don't have time to get into all those details, but we'll talk a little bit about it, because when you do go into licensed contracting, you are taking on a lot of overhead. And that's why you have to charge a fair amount to your clients, because you need to recoup that. You have to pay for that liability insurance somehow. You have to pay for that bond somehow. You have to pay for keeping all your books in order so that you can, legitimize yourselves on the tax end of things. And those are all overhead, non-billable expenses. So we'll talk about that. So the first thing, though, and this is part of what I'm talking about, is that you really need to know yourself and have a plan and develop a narrative for your life. Don't just jump into contracting because you think it's really sexy and cool and everybody's doing it. Because maybe as you start, and this is kind of goes to that holistic goal, that setting your context and your holistic goal in a way, is what is your trajectory? What is it that you actually want? Who do you want to be in the world? What is the career path that is going to sing to your heart? That is, you are going to find peace and happiness and joy in doing that work. And so ultimately, the hope and the goal is that we can all align the things that make us feel happy, that what gives us joy as our work, and those things can be aligned, and we can live a fulfilling life and provide for the monetary needs of our family and ourselves. But I'll tell you one of the first roadblocks. As we go through this talk, I will identify a series of rites of passage that I've been through and I've seen other colleagues go through. It's pretty much the same for everybody, that I just want you to be aware of as you go on your journey. The first one is that it's often going to take longer than you think. And the first couple years in contracting can be a struggle. It can be living project to project, living paycheck to paycheck. You don't really feel like you're making that much money. I had many years where, in fact, I remember this one time, we were finishing a project, and we had nothing else on the books. Like, there were no other projects that we had a contract with. And I had 4 employees at that time. And I remember I'm driving into the landscape materials place to get like the last order of stone to finish this project. And I just sat there in the parking lot, just paralyzed, because I really didn't know what we were going to do. I didn't know how to go find another job. I wasn't really sure what was going to happen. And it all just started sort of collapsing. In my head, it all started collapsing down. That moment, while I was sitting there in the car, stressing out, I got a phone call. Answered the phone. It was a client that we'd done work for in the past, and she wanted new work. And it was like, hallelujah, thank you, universe. You came through right at that time. And I can't tell you how many years I lived like that, where we were getting to the tail end of something and we just didn't know if there was something next. And then something always comes in, always comes in. There's a sense of faith in that. And so don't give up, because as you build the foundation of a company, it takes time. But once that foundation is built and it's solid, like the place I'm at now with Permaculture Artisans, now we have flexibility. Like we're very, very solid. We have clients that we've had for years. They still have work coming through. We have other big clients that we're starting to get into the fold. And so now, because we made it through all these little rites of passage and stuck with it, didn't give up, now we have something really powerful to build on. Okay, kind of connected to, I was talking a little bit last night about work ethic. I don't know how many people heard that. Yeah, okay. So this might be just a case of West Sonoma County, California, but I am not sure if it's just a case of West Sonoma County, California. And that is this. You get so many inspired, passionate people coming out of permaculture courses and coming out of college and all this. And they are just like so ready to jump in and get involved and do work. And a lot of the time they do not show up professional. For some reason, there is some gap. I don't know if it's in the education system or it's just like the culture that the new generation of land stewards grew up with in their homes. I'm not sure what it is, too much video games. I don't know what it is, folks. But there's an attitude that is totally unprofessional that has woven its way through the entire permaculture community around young practitioners. And one of the reasons why I named our contracting company Permaculture Artisans actually was because the word permaculture in our community started to get associated with stoned hippies who never showed up on time. Honestly. People who would hire out someone who was great skilled, really good designer, really good builder, very talented, would show up, get into a contract with a client, and then not show up on time, maybe not show up at all. And I can't tell you how many times I heard stories like, yeah, he came, he did like a third of the project, and then, you know, one day I got a call and he said, well, I'm in Hawaii and I'll be back in a month. He left all his equipment on site and we don't know what to do. That kind of story, that's just like one sort of snapshot of the kinds of stories that we hear over and over and over again. And so part of the reason why my organization, the Permaculture Skills Center, has launched this advanced training course called the Ecological Landscaper Immersion Program is to create a place where people can learn skills to be professional. Because how are we possibly going to take the solutions in regenerative agriculture and permaculture and ecological design, how are we going to take those solutions and scale them to the level that we need on the planet right now if we're not doing it professionally? No one's going to take us seriously. And so I always ask the question, do we want to be just a little fringe movement, kind of just on the side, that's kind of spinning our wheels, doing our little thing, while the world in the trajectory of development and landscape and contracting goes in this totally other direction? Or do we want to jump on and seriously transition development into ecological regenerative practices? And I want to do the latter, and so I feel like we need to be really professional. I used to have, appearance, whatever. I really don't care so much about appearance, but I would just say this. For many years, I had long hair. I had it in braids, and I was just kind of like always looked disheveled. Never wore a button-up shirt and all that. These are just little things. Depending on who the client is, they don't care. Often you get clients and they just they want that rootsy kind of groovy person. But sometimes you'll get a client, they're really serious. They're about to spend $100,000 on your company. They want to know that you're going to call them back. They want to know you're going to show up on time. They want to know you're going to communicate professionally with them. You're going to do quality work. And sometimes just the first impression will just shut them down immediately. This is a really funny story. I used to have this green woolly hoodie. It was like a really hairy wool, just like really sticking up hairy wool. And it was the first time that I was invited into a meeting with this general contractor. Big wig general contractor, worked for all these vineyards and stuff. And so a friend hooked me up and said, hey, you should really get to know this guy because he could subcontract your company out. He's got all these big projects. They want to start doing eco stuff. He could subcontract you out. And I said, oh, okay, cool, yeah. Okay, so I got invited to this lunch. So I go to this lunch, and I'm wearing my big old green, woolly thing. And I go in, and all of them are wearing slacks, button-up shirts, some of them sports coats, some of them ties. They got these perfect hairdos, and we're in a really shishi fancy restaurant in Santa Rosa, California. And I go in there, and I introduce myself, and one of the first things the guy says is, "Hey, can we smoke that jacket?" And when I went home, and obviously that meeting went terrible, and I did not end up getting to work with those folks, I went home and I told my wife, and she's like, "Yeah, we're going to get you a new jacket like tomorrow." It's like, "Yeah, I think I need a new jacket." Little things, right? Like if I showed up differently to that meeting, this guy was working with multi-hundred-acre wineries and vineyards that wanted to do water catchment systems, doing development, building wineries and stuff. If I showed up to that meeting in a professional manner, in a way where they could assimilate and connect with me, who knows what could have happened, right? So these little moments really make a big difference. So here's another piece, is that I'm done with talking about permaculture and regenerative agriculture and all these ecological things as somehow something that's alternative, something that's subculture, something that is this different little fringe thing. I think that what we do and what we talk about here at Permaculture Voices and a lot of the work that you all do is good design, good implementation. It's efficiency. It's energy saving. It's surplus generating, right? These things, this language, everybody can get on board with that kind of language, right? We're not saying, let's go do some really cool eco-groovy shit, man. We're going to like catch you some water, and we're going to do some cool stuff. We're going to grow some food. I mean, that's all cool to package it like that, but I feel like if we can package solutions in a way that no matter your ideology, no matter the political party you align yourself with, no matter the religion that you're part of, no matter your race, no matter you're rich, you're poor, none of those things matter. If we can if we can message solutions in a way where it can cut across cultural lines and ideologies, I think we're onto something really powerful here. And that's one of the goals, and again, that's one of the reasons why I actually named the company Permaculture Artisans, because trying to push back on this subculture thing and say, no, look, we're permaculture. Here we are. Let's do this. You know, we're going to show up on time. We're going to communicate clearly. We're going to be well organized. We're going to get the job done, and it's going to be amazing. And as you start to develop more and more successful projects like that, people start to now associate, oh, that's permaculture. Oh, okay, I get it. Because this way people will take us and our solutions seriously. So I talked last night a lot about relationships, and I need to talk more about it because I don't actually consider myself a very good businessman. I never did it. I don't have like an MBA or anything like that. I'm really terrible with spreadsheets. I'm really not good. I'm not a number cruncher. That's just not who I am. That's not how I operate. I have people who do that, and they're really good at it, and they love it. I can't do that, and I don't even want to bang my head against the wall to try to do that. I'm clear. So you need to be clear about what is the role that you feel passionate and lit up about. And you want to be clear that all of that organizing stuff has to happen anyway. So at some point, you start your business, you may say, you know, I need to hire an admin support part-time for, 2 days a week as I'm getting going, just to help deal with this stuff. I can focus on the clients. I can focus on building the projects and making money and being efficient that way if I'm not sitting there stressing about, how to input the receipts into QuickBooks, right? So what I've built my success on is all relationship. It's all relationship-based, and I have so many stories I could share with you about situations where we messed up on a project. We messed up on an estimate. Something went wrong. And I showed up and I said, you know what? We messed up. We are totally going to own this mistake. And you know what we're going to do? We're not going to charge you for it. And we're going to fix it for you at no charge. And it's risky business, and I've literally, I'm okay sharing this with you, I've literally walked away from $25,000 on a job to keep the relationship intact. That same client started sending us money to support scholarships for the Ecological Landscaper Immersion program. Later on, the relationship was totally intact. And now I'm not saying go walk away from $25,000. That was a risky move. That is not something I'm suggesting you do. But many times away, I've had to leave money on, many times I've left money on the table with a client because I needed to make a situation right. And let's be clear here. No matter if you have 20, 30, 40, 50 years experience in contracting and building, and I've talked to the old timers, I spent a lot of time with the old timers talking to them, no matter how much experience you have, no matter how good you are, no matter how well organized you are, shit is going to happen. Mistakes are going to be made, and you're going to have a project that's going to go haywire. It's always going to happen. You need to be ready for that. You need to have a little cash reserve kitty, actually, that's devoted to help you in those kinds of situations. So in terms of building relationships, now what I do with my clients is the really, really important clients, I don't even charge them for a consultation half the time. I show up, I pet the dog, I sit on the couch, I drink tea, I comment on the beauty of their house, I just hang out with them like a family member, like a friend. I take them out to lunch, I take them out to breakfast, I invite them to our events. That is the stuff that matters. That matters almost more than the service or product that you're giving. And I know this from experience because I have clients that are, angel investors that have invested tons of money to make the Permaculture Skill Center possible. And most of the time when I hang out with those clients, we never talk about work. We're always talking about family or talking about what the dog did or whatnot. And this is really, really important stuff, is that people want to feel, more than ever I experience that clients, they want to feel comfortable around you. There are those exceptions to the rule. There are those clients who just want a very sterile, professional relationship, and they want to all buy the books, and they want to all buy the numbers, and so you need to be ready to do that. But a lot of the clients, the ones that really matter, a lot of the ones that have a lot of money, they don't want to just invest in the work. They want to be around people that they love to be around. And I'll talk more about that in the company culture piece. But you want to have good communication whenever you can. If it's right for you, do something that you don't charge them for. That really sets you up in a good way. You want to have follow-through. You want to be open to feedback. You want to be able to go to your client and say, how was this? How did this work for you? Are you happy? What didn't work well? What can be better? Just asking that question, the clients are like, oh, wow, okay, well, I'm really happy with this. This could have been a little different. This is okay. And then there's an opportunity like, oh, you know what? I'm going to get a guy back here for 2 hours. We're going to make that exactly how you want. I'm not going to charge you for it. A month later, they're calling you back. Hey, we bought a new property. You want to come see it? We want to develop that property too, right? Because they trust you. There's a relationship there. I really can't say enough about how powerful and important that is. All right, workflow. So we're going to get into some nuts and bolts here. This is a general workflow for how we operate at Permaculture Artisans. A call comes in or an email comes in to set up a consultation. I don't really do a lot of consultations anymore. My colleague and friend Grover Stock, who's here in the front here, he's available to talk to him. Grover's been working with us for a few years now, and he has decades of experience in running his own company and permaculture design, biodynamic. Can't say enough good things about Grover. Well, Grover does all of our consultations now. And maybe if you have anything to add, Grover, as we go through, let me know. One of the things that Grover and I talk a lot about, and we're similar, and we talked a little bit about last night, is that the consultation is the place where you sell the client. That's the initial buy-in place. And when you, and like I said, petting the dog, playing with the kid, these are the kinds of things you do at the consultation. If there's an openness to it, if there's a comfort there. And then the clients are like, oh, Uncle Grover, so good having you here, And if you could do that within 30 minutes or an hour, you know that you've bought them in. So the first step is a consultation. Sometimes we'll follow up a consultation with a report and maybe a follow-up call. Now, it gets a little tricky. Now, we charge for pretty much all of our consultations, $100 an hour. Someone calls, it's $100 an hour to get Grover out there to do a consultation. Now, the very, very special clients that call, and you're like, oh, it's this guy, okay. Then I'll just show up and I won't charge them. They might even be told they're going to get charged, but if I start feeling like, ooh, this could be a really big project, this could be really amazing, I'll often say, you know what, we'll just keep talking. You know, we won't charge you for this one. And that creates that buy-in. So at the consultation, you get a sense of that. So sometimes we'll write a report. A report, when I do a report, it's, here's an overview of what we came up with at the consultation. And I'll tell you, I don't know if a lot of you are like this, but when I go visit a site and I walk through the land, the first thing I'm doing, what's the first thing in permaculture you do when you walk onto the land? Observe, assess, what did you say? It depends. We had to get that in there somewhere, right? Usually it's observation and it's assessment. I'll tell you what I suggest you don't do. When you're doing a consultation with somebody, and you really need to read the client just as much as you're reading the landscape. So that's the first thing is, read the landscape, but read the client. And sometimes you'll get the vibe, oh, I need to read the client even more than I need to read the landscape at this juncture. So you need to kind of understand, like, what do I need to focus my energy right now? Sometimes it's the client, sometimes it's the landscape, sometimes it's both. So what I will often do is the first hour of a consultation, I will try to hold back providing any suggestions about anything. Often, and I'll tell them that, I'll say, hey, look, the first step in this consultation is I wanted to walk around the property, I want to get a sense of the land, get a sense of the landscape, get a sense of you, what are your goals, what are your dreams, what's your budget, what's your timeline, who else is working for you? These are all really important questions to ask. And once I feel like I've gathered enough information during the consultation, then I'll reflect back a set of suggestions or interventions. Question? You taking this as notes, or are you just mental notes? I'm taking them as mental notes, personally. What do you do, Grover? Both. Depending on your learning style. Mine is stay present, I can't look at my phone or write anything down. I just keep it here, and then I can reflect back, and then usually I'll get home and I'll dictate into my phone, just like the Notes app on an iPhone or Evernote. You just go in there, you just dictate. I'll just talk into it. You know, soil issues at the site, blah, 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 water, site, blah, 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 and then that could turn into a report later. You could take that and hybridize that into a report. So often I'm listening, I'm just spending time, and here's what you want to look for. You want to look for a zinger. And what I mean by a zinger is you want to look for that problem that client has that either they haven't noticed it yet or you see that they're going in a total wrong direction. Sometimes I've had experiences with consultations where I literally saved the client $30,000 in 1 hour. That's what we can do for people. You walk onto a site and you see that they're about to bulldoze inside a creek. And you say, I see that you have some stuff going on. This is great. So what are you doing, actually? Why is the bulldozer there? And you learn a little bit and you say, well, just so you know, I don't know if you're aware of this, you could get fined a lot of money for doing that. I just want you to be aware. How is your relationship with the neighbors? Oh, that neighbor always turns people in. We should probably back that bulldozer up now, and let's go back to the drawing board. Things like that, you have to be really careful, because sometimes clients are like, I'm doing what I'm doing no matter what, and we're going forward, and blah, blah, blah. I don't care about the consequences. And so those clients, you have to, that's why I said read the client, because you don't want to also shut the client off in that first consultation. But sometimes there's that zinger, and you say, I would suggest going in this direction with that. And they go, oh, wow, okay, oh my gosh, the crew is about to show up here tomorrow. I'm so glad. And at that point, now they're really leaning on you. And they're like, could you come back tomorrow? Can we start working next week? And so it's those moments when people are already, and I'll tell you the clients that do this the most, and they're some of the best clients, people who just bought property. People who just bought property, something you need to know about these folks is they have money in their pocket, burning a hole in their pocket, right? They sold their other place, or they got money from, investments from family or something, and then not only do they want to buy their property, but they want the machines to show up like on day one, and they want to start doing stuff. Those are the people that often make a lot of mistakes at the beginning. So we've got consultation, report, follow-up, and then depending on what the next step is, we try to get our clients to move into a design proposal phase. That's always the best projects start with a design. And what I mean by a design proposal, we send them a design proposal based on the consultation information that Grover or I may have gathered from the consultation. We send them a design proposal and say, here's how much it would cost to create a base map. Here's how much it would cost to do a concept design. Here's the deliverables. And your contract wants to be very explicit. We're going to do a concept map. It's not architectural unless you're doing architectural work, and that's a different conversation. We're going to have a grading plan. We're going to have an irrigation detail. We're going to have a planting plan. And these might be different line items that you have in your contract. And so we'll send them over in almost this sort of a cafeteria-style menu of say, we'll break them down. We won't say, here's all these things we're going to do and it costs this much. We'll actually break them down in smaller pieces because often, and this is almost always the case, clients don't understand how much design costs. Oh, what? $3,000? I thought it'd be like $300. Like, that's what this meeting cost. I mean, are you kidding me? So that's why it's good to break it down by different pieces, because then the client can say, well, I don't really have $3,000, but I'll spend $1,500. Say, all right, we're going to do the base map and the concept map. Done. Question?
What does it mean when you say non-architectural versus the rest of the drawing?
So a landscape architect, here's the thing about landscape architecture. Permaculture Artisans doesn't do landscape architecture at this point. A landscape architect, when you have a design that is on the level of an architectural level, that design has been created so that someone else can build it just by looking at the design. So that means that the design is going to have all kinds of details. Here's how tall the wall is going to be, and it's going to go for this distance. And we're going to use this kind of material, and it's going to be that size rock, and you need to put the drain 2 inches up from behind the rock, and we're going to do 4 inches of gravel, and we're going to wrap it with you. And all those details are going to be in the design so that another contractor can come and build that. Well, Permaculture Artisans, we're a design-build company. We don't design things for other people to build them. We design them so we can build them, or we design them so that the client can, like sometimes they'll take the design and they'll hire someone else, but it's really clear. We have a stamp on our designs. These are not architectural drawings. These are not meant for building. And that's really, really important because what could happen, this is something to be aware of, especially as designers, what can happen is if you do a design and you sell it to a client and then they get a builder to come in and build your design, and then a huge storm comes and the wall washes out, and the builder says, well, I was going on the design. The design said to do it like this, this, and that. The designer is now liable for all of the damage, not the builder. So that's why architects have to cover their butts, and that's why they cost a ton of money. If we were doing landscape architecture design, it would be twice as expensive to get a design out of Permaculture Artisans. And for our clientele, that would cut our clientele into a small percentage of who we have now. So did you want to add anything on that, Enrique?
No, it's true. Yeah, we do design build. Permittable plans at most, but yeah, doing public works, yeah, we need architects. General thumb is just like, what are you going to tell the judge? Basically, make sure you have your butt covered.
And that's a good point that Enrique brings up. Enrique works with La Loma Development out of Pasadena. He's a project manager there. Great resource. It's a great point that he brings up is depending on who your clients are. If you're working with the city, you're working with public works, you're working with the county, then yeah, you're going to need architectural designs. Permaculture Artisans, we're not really going to provide that level of design. But what we can do is if we're the driver of this ship, we can bring in architects and say, okay, here's our concept design for what we want. Now we want you to take our concept and we want you to put it into an architectural form. And we know that there's going to be changes. You're going to tweak our design around. But at least we got the core pieces in of like harvesting water and building soil and all these things. And I'll tell you, most landscape architects out there, bleep, 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 just don't have an ecological sense, right? And I can't tell you how many times landscape architects or just regular architects, I can't tell you how many times that they design from the computer, from the Google Maps, from Google Earth, from topography. They don't even walk the site. And so I've had a project where we're going to site the house that an architect came up with. The whole design, and the client spent thousands and thousands of dollars for these plans. The architect never visited the site one time. They designed everything off of what they could find, technology-wise. We go to the house site, and there's a 10-ton boulder right in the middle of where the house is supposed to go, right? Didn't show up somehow on one of their maps. It's like, there's a 10-ton boulder right there. And there was like 10 of them. Okay, I don't think we can put the house here, right? So this is one of the issues we find a lot with architects and why we need to bring a permaculture ecological frame into the architectural world. Because when you do find an architect that gets it, those are some go-to people there. Is there another question? Comment?
Yeah, it's along those lines. From what you're saying about you don't offer architectural design, do you find yourself wanting to do that, or are you satisfied with the relationship that you're going to be able to bring in by leveraging other architects who can be trained to see along the line?
Yeah, I really teeter back and forth on that. My main designer, she's a Cornell trained, she's a trained landscape architect, but she doesn't have the licensing. And this year, we just started talking about funding to get her to go get her license, because it would open up a whole set of new projects with like commercial and government projects. And so that would be really cool to open that up. But there's a gut check on that, which is that we don't really need those projects right now. We're doing totally fine with the projects that we have. And I start to fear the liability. I mean, this is scary stuff. When you get a company the size of mine right now with 20 employees, there's a $25,000 payroll every 2 weeks. I mean, these things are really scary. I get a little scared, and then when I start thinking about doing architectural plans where now we're taking way more liability, way more responsibility for what happens in designing for other people to build, that's just not somewhere I've been willing to go just yet.
Well, if you were to, the second you present some architect's plan, do you take on liability, or is there a way to shunt that liability or stamp?
They have a stamp. They stamp it. As soon as their stamp is on there, they're liable.
So if you were to fund her licensing and say, I'll fund your licensing, you take the liability, and then all of a sudden you've got a relationship.
And then between she and I, then we have an agreement between us, which works out if something happens and all of that. That's something that we would work on the back end. The clients wouldn't see any of that, but then she and I would have a relationship that would protect her. If I'm pushing her to go get your art license and I'll take the liability, then we have to have an agreement there.
And I don't know how does that work in USA, but in Canada, usually landscape architects only do the design, and they have they are mandated to make the surveillance of the work, to check it that it goes well. So you have a conflict of interest if you do the installation and you do the design. Because then that's not possible. It's not the law, but it's not possible to do that if you're a landscape architect in the right side.
Yeah. So a design build business is really great, because you take less liability on the design side, you take all the liability on the building side, but you can adjust things. The beautiful thing about that is you have so much more flexibility, because you can make changes in the field, and you don't have this landscape architect coming breathing down your neck and tell you, no, it has to go 6 inches that way, and that one's 4 inches that way. My gosh, it's like these kind of things you experience sometimes with architects. So a design build company is a good way to go, but like I was saying last night, and I want to say it again, we need to dominate these professions and these industries with an ecological mindset. And so becoming a landscape architect who has a permaculture ecological lens, we need that. So if anyone here is willing to go down that route, we got your back on that.
Well, so do you run across permitting issues then, or problems with this design build scenario with it's not stamped? How do you handle that?
Yeah, so there's a large portion of our projects that aren't going through a permitting process. It's residential. We often will skirt it. We're a lot of rural stuff, and so that doesn't come up. When the permitting stuff does come up, then we do have architects we work with. We do have engineers, and they pretty much now it's a team. It's a network. And we had a project that Grover and I worked on a couple years ago. Big project, $1 million project. There was an architect, there were engineers, there were county people. Something even got red tagged, so we had to go through a whole process of coming into alignment on some work that got done. And at that point, it's about a network of professionals. And I think, is that my next slide? No, it's not. At that point, it's about, what we've created is we have a team of professionals, architects, engineers, planners, that we really trust. They love working with us. We love working with them. They have an ecological lens. So as soon as those kind of issues come up, it's like, oh, okay, this is time to bring in the engineer, Jeff Lowe, or bring in the architect, and now we're going to do this as a team. And that's the beautiful thing about creating the guild concept again, that people guild concept. When you have a bunch of contractors and professionals that you really lean on, like you know them, they know you really go to bat for each other. And what happens is I'm always trying to get work for my engineer friend. Like, I like to hook him up. And then he'll hook us up with work because he'll find a client and say, oh, this is a client wants to do permaculture, perfect for you. And so as you start developing those relationships with professionals, and you start actually opening up new markets that way. And so you get a function stack on that side. So just to go through this real quick, or someone has something to add? Just go through this real quick. Consultation, report and follow-up, possibly, design proposal, that gets approved. We go into the design. Once we have a design, if the client wants it, we'll do an installation estimate. So this is our workflow here. So we go from design to installation. Now here's an edge where there's a lot of challenge and tension, is when you go from design to install. How is that information being passed off from the design team to the installation team? And if you're not doing architectural design, what often happens is the installation team gets a little frustrated because they've got to go design a bunch of the details in the field. So one thing that we're really working on is how does the design team set up the installation team with all the information that they need so the installation team can just go for it. And often I'm not going to talk a ton about design process. That's a whole 2-week workshop. But what I will say is that you have to ask yourself and your client a very important question when you go into the design process. Are we designing the dream design? Are we designing for 50 years, 100 years? Is this a generational design? Is that what we're designing for? Or are we designing to your budget in 2016? Because I've seen it happen both ways, where the client says, yeah, I want it all. I want the dream. And you do the client intake, and you figure out their goals and their dreams and all that. You say, great, we're going to design you. It's going to be amazing. Oh, my gosh, we're so excited about this design. And we come up with this amazing design. It costs $500,000 to build. And the client's like, I can't afford that. And you say, well, this is, give yourself 40 years to build that. I mean, we're talking about the bigger vision. So now we really work with our clients a lot. Don't make this mistake, is have that conversation at the get-go. What is your workflow? What is your process? Do you have a budget? Do you want a design and build this year and you're done? Do you want something that you can slowly phase develop over the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years? And if that's so, then dream big. If it's, I really need to keep it to this budget, like I just need this functional plan and I want to build it this year or the next couple of years and be done, then we're not going to put all the bells and whistles. We're not going to have the cob oven, bench, rocket stove, awesome patio with the arbor with grapes and the whole thing. That's a $50,000 thing right there, right? So you're going to start taking out architectural elements. It's like, oh, you just want to have an orchard, a water harvesting orchard. Okay, swales and fruit trees. We're done. Great. That's what we're going to design it for. We're going to keep it within your budget. So that's a really important question to ask and to suss out. And when you ask clients about their budget, know this. hardly ever does a client actually tell you what their real budget is. Often, they tell you a number they feel comfortable with, and then they usually go up from there, usually. Sometimes they come down, but they usually go up. So you got consultation, report, follow-up, design proposal, design, install. If you get the approved estimate, one of the most important things that we've found is having a pre-construction meeting. Before anyone builds or does anything, you get the designer, you get the project manager, you get the foreman, and you get the client. And you all go out onto the site and you talk about, you know, what, you go through the design plan and you work out all the little details and kinks. So that's a smooth process. All right, and then you always want to have a final walkthrough. All right, so we're going to just cruise through some of this stuff. Just some things about the consultations we talked about, to charge or not to charge, how much time to spend. Generally, much more than 2 hours on like a regular, you know, few acre homestead. You don't really need to spend much more than that. Sometimes what I'll do, if it's a really big project, I find, and everyone does this differently, but my best site assessment, that when I am operating at my highest functioning in terms of a designer and a planner and reading the landscape, I need to be alone. Actually, I can't have a client sitting there talking in my ear the whole time and question. So often, if it's a project that requires that, I'll actually ask the client if I can come back for, say, 4 to 6 hours and just wander the property and get an understanding of patterns and relationships and the flows. And that almost always has a greater impact in the design later on than the ones where we're just trying to run it through in a couple hours. Like I said, read the client as much as you read the land. And then the relationship piece, the petting the dog, playing with the baby, these are all parts of the thing that help you make that sell and building the relationship. Okay, estimates and contracts. Let's talk about this for a moment. So estimates and proposals versus time and materials. Oh, the hours spent in this conversation are just ridiculous. We often will do a contract because we're trying to meet a client's budget, and we're trying to build something to meet their budget. So we're going to take out bells and whistles, we're going to add stuff in, and we're sort of trying to craft, we're trying to give them their dreams. We're trying to build their goals and their dreams with the budget that they have. And that usually falls into more of a estimate proposal realm. But sometimes time and materials is actually a better way to go. How many people here know what the time and materials is, or the difference between these? Okay, this is really important stuff to know if you want to get into this field. Time and materials is you charge the client exactly what it took to do the project. So I've got 5 guys out there today, I've got an excavator, and we have $10,000 in material. I'm going to charge them for 5 guys, an excavator, and $10,000 in material. Now, the problem with time materials is when the project starts to go beyond what the client perceives as their budget. They have a budget, but they didn't really tell you about it. They're like, we just want you to do time materials, see how well you do. And that can be a little tricky when you're halfway through a project and the client says, oh, that's all the money I have. I can't believe we didn't finish the project. Oh, but you didn't tell us what your budget was and you wanted to do time and materials. So one of the ways that you get around doing that is every week or every 2 weeks, you track where you're at in the project, how much it costs, and you deliver that to the client. And this is really, really important stuff. We're going to kind of move on a little bit faster here when we get into project management. So to make the project management is like the glue that makes a project function. It's what keeps the client happy, it keeps the crew happy, it keeps you on task, it keeps you efficient. And if you have multiple crews running, you really need a manager who can step back and see the flow of projects. And if a company like mine, where I've got 20 employees, I got to keep 20 people working, right? Well, how do I keep 20 people? I can't put 20 people on one job. So maybe I have 4 jobs. But even within those 4 jobs, oh, this one ends, and the next one that crew's going to work doesn't start for a week. What do I do in that extra week? So really good scheduling and planning. It's really strategy. It's almost like a chess game or a puzzle as a project manager so that you're keeping people always employed and working and you don't have these little lag moments. Now, when you do have lag moments, okay, everyone back to the yard. We're going to clean all the tools. We're going to grease up the tractors. We're going to organize the tool shed. We're going to haul away all the recycle that came off the projects. And those are good filler things that you can do in between projects. But tracking is probably one of the most important make or break tools that you need to do when you're working projects. And there's a few different things of tracking. You're tracking the budget, right? And you want to be able to know what you're spending. You want to be able to know where are you in the project. Are you 50% done with the project but 75% done with the budget? That's not a good place to be. You want to learn that before you get there. And I can't tell you how many times that my, just like that didn't happen and we didn't track very well. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, whoops, okay, we are kind of screwed. What are we going to do? Well, again, back to the relationship piece. Don't try to hide that stuff. Hiding stuff from clients is going to sink your company. It's going to sink your reputation. So you really want to be upfront with clients about things, and that's where change orders come in, okay? Often, I don't know any of you professionals ever experienced this. You have a signed contract, you start the project, and 3 days in, the client goes out and says, oh, well, since you got the excavator here, do you think you could just, knock that fence down for me over there? I mean, it's probably only going to take a couple hours, right? And, can you just, dig up, we want to plant some trees. Can you just dig like 4 holes? And so for a long time, I'm like, yeah, sure, no problem. I want to make the client happy. And then when you look back at the budget, like, oh no, where did this extra $1,000 got spent? And it was the 4 holes here last week, and this week it was knocking the fence down, and then like last month it was we helped them move their couch from the living room to the upstairs. I mean, clients ask for all kinds of crazy stuff, and you're gonna say yes pretty much every time. So you have to be really clear, say, okay, this is billable. And when we talk about billable, there's 2 kinds of work. There's billable work and there's non-billable work. You really need to understand this to get this right. Non-billable, that's making the estimates. That's often phone calls, or it's selling the client on things, or it's doing your office work, it's doing your QuickBooks, it's having staff meetings and these kinds of things. You can't charge a client for that stuff, and you have to recoup that in your billable hours, which is when you're actually on the ground doing stuff that you can charge the client for. So you have to keep that balance. This is like a 10-week course we're trying to fit into the next 10 minutes. So I'm going to just speed through here. We're going to just skip on scheduling, communication systems. We could talk a lot more about this. I really want to talk about, though, because there's plenty of stuff out there that shows you how to run a business. And hopefully, Aaron, are you going to talk a little bit about culture in your?
Actually, I am, and I'm going to talk right after you.
Beautiful. Okay, so I'm going to set you up a little bit here. And just say this, if you're in a company where you have employees, there's a number of things that are going to happen. Conflict is going to arise. You'll have employees that don't work out. Issues are going to come up. Employees might walk off a project. There's all kinds of things that can happen. To avoid having big mistakes that make you look really bad and make your client upset, you want to invest in your culture. Aaron will go into more details, but I'll just say one of the things that we've done in our company is we have staff meetings now, quarterly staff meetings. Last year, we invested tens of thousands of dollars into every month having an all-day, all-paid staff meeting. And I'm not going to do it again this year, but let me tell you, it was so worth it. We had lunch together. We had meetings where every person, even the newest worker who's the ditch digger all day, had a voice to say, here's what's working for me, here's what's not working for me, here's what my dreams are, here's what I would like to see happen. And that input came in, and we took that into account, and that changed the trajectory of the company. It also created buy-in. Atmosphere. We talk about atmosphere all the time. We don't want negative, toxic energy in our company, because if that energy permeates through the culture of the company, people start gossiping, people lose morale, and that moves into the clientele. The clients pick up on that stuff. I know we've done a good job when the client comes, and I think I mentioned this last night, when the client comes and says, I'm really sad that you guys are leaving, that you're done, because we just love having you around. Can we invite you back for a party or something? Or can your crew come? I'll tell you, this happens all of the time. People fall in love with our crew because we want to have fun. We have a family atmosphere that we create when we're in a working environment. And part of that, the employee buy-in, is we have parties. We drink beer together. We sit around the fire together. And we invest in our folks so that we really want to have that family vibe. And I can't tell you how powerful that is. Conflict resolution. You need to have a plan for resolving conflict. The absence of a plan is not a fun experience, and probably a lot of you experienced that before. So one of the things that we've been starting to do is really have meetings and talk a lot about conflict and what do you do and what's step 1 and step 2. And we have an entire conflict resolution protocol that we've shared with the company and people have basically signed on. If you're in a conflict, here's step 1, here's step 2, here's step 3, here's step 4. It's very compassionate, it's very supportive, people are owning their own feelings and taking initiative. And this is really, really key. Raises and bonuses. If you want to keep morale up in your company, people need to know that they have a place to go. If they think that they're going to hit the ceiling in year 1 or 2, and that's it, and for the rest of their job, they're going to be hauling rock for you at $15 an hour, and that's their life, that's not very, that's pretty demoralizing for them. And they don't really know what to do. So every year, at the end of the year, we give bonuses. If we do awesome on a job, oh my gosh, we just rocked this job, it was amazing, we're giving bonuses. I mean, sometimes you kind of feel like the mafioso. You're like, hey, here's a $100 bill, good job. Here's a $100 bill, good job. But that kind of stuff, it does wonders for the atmosphere and for the culture. And like I've said before, I have people working with me now for 10 years. They're not going anywhere. They're totally invested. Build a network of professionals. We talked a lot about that. Know your community. So if you want to open up markets, I really suggest that rather than just trying to go after individuals, integrate yourself into communities. I've now worked with the Waldorf school communities, and we've get tons and tons of clients, Waldorf clients, because we work in that community. Sports communities, playing soccer. We've got folks on on our crew who play soccer. Sometimes that leads to clients. Church groups. And, et cetera. There's so many different community groups, Zumba, yoga. I mean, these are all places where you can open up markets for your clientele if you start building relationship within these communities. So if you don't know where you're going, you're going to have a hard time getting there. And I think that we're at a place now on the planet where ecological design and a regenerative and ecological approach to development is more than necessary. It's vital. And I feel like we have an opportunity now to not just think small time, but we can actually dream really big. And I think that what you have to know is the greatest obstacle for you to setting goals and limits that you think are beyond yourself and achieving them, the greatest obstacle is the fact that you tell yourself you can't do it. That's the only thing really standing in your way. And so I just want to support you that it's the inner work, honestly, makes all this possible. It's not the outer work, it's the inner work. And so if you can get out of your own way, when you, for instance, how many times do you think, oh, I want to do this, I want to be that. In 5-10 years, I would like to be like Darren Doherty. I want to be the next Darren Doherty in 10 years. And you say, no way. How could I ever do that? That's just like, oh my gosh, I can't do that. You just took your chances away. You just, that was it. It's done. It's over, right? You say, oh man, I want to do this amazing work. I want to be an international regenerative agriculture designer, planner, consultant, and I want to move agriculture and landscape in this direction, and I'm going to figure out how to do it. I only have 2 pennies rubbed together, but you know what? I don't care. I'm going to do it. you know what pathways are going to open up for you. People are going to feel the confidence of that, and you're going to start making the right connections and make it happen. So dream big, create a plan for your business and your life. And beyond that, utilize Permaculture Artisans and Permaculture Skill Center as a resource for you. We have these programs at the Permaculture Skill Center that you can take where we actually teach you. This talk that I gave is really a 6-month program called the Ecological Landscaper Immersion Program. So we could dive deep into all these things that we're talking about. Then we run scenarios, we meet clients, we go on tours, we actually build projects, we project manage them, we do multiple designs. All these things happen within these programs. So good luck, everybody. Thank you very much.